Welcome to this web series, The Frugal Mindset, also known as Money and the Responsible Christian. This is the second segment of our Frugal Mindset Money Skills section of the webinar, but this is the 12th segment overall of the webinar. And in this section, we will discuss the 3 need questions. Now, the first need question is this truly a need? Is this the best route? And how am I going to pay for it? Is this truly a need? Is this the best route? And how am I going to pay for it? People have long discussions about needs versus wants. And needs and wants are going to vary from person to person. There are a couple of biblical quotes about needs. When Jesus gives his disciples the Lord's Prayer, it's, "Give us this day our daily bread." So does that mean our only real need is bread? No, that's not what Jesus was saying at all. He was saying, give us our needs. And certainly daily bread is the most obvious example of need, to have something to eat. 1 Timothy 6:8 gives us another insight as to needs. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. Well, does that mean the only need there is food and clothing? Well, for some of us, that's possibly. There are a lot of people in the world that's all they have. But that's not proper exegesis. That's not proper interpretation of Scripture. That's not really what God is saying to us in those passages. If you're interpreting those passages that way, you're getting into legalism. The pastor at the church we attend now, he's a wonderful preacher, his name is Mark, and Pastor Mark gave a great sermon a while ago about legalism. And legalism applies to everything in life. Don't be legalistic about what are needs and what are wants, especially when you're looking at other people's needs and wants. For example, if you wanted to be technical and say, the only need is food and clothing, well then what about when you have a child who's got diabetes and they're insulin dependent? Are you seriously saying that insulin isn't a need for that family? Of course it is. If you have a child who needs a drug or a spouse or yourself, then that is a need for you. Certainly the basics, food, clothing, and shelter are generally needs. But needs are not the same for everyone. For some people, they're going to, with medical conditions, or some people may feel health insurance is in need. Some people need a vehicle to get around. Some people don't. Some families may reasonably need 2 vehicles. But needs is, we tend to be very broad about the concept of needs in America. A lot of things we need, we don't need. And one of my great complaints is sort of like the advertising used to be for McDonald's. You deserve a break today. I guarantee you, folks, I don't want what I deserve. I thank God for all of his blessings and his grace and his mercy. I don't want what I deserve. And we need to have that attitude, frankly, realizing what we deserve and then being appreciative of our blessings. But let me talk about the difference between wants and needs. Let me give you an example of a discussion of needs. My parents were both born in 1919. So their formative years were during the Great Depression. They both lived in farming communities, so they were blessed to both have adequate food. And my father had 2 pair of pants. He had his Monday through Saturday pants, and he had his Sunday go to church pants, and that's it. And they didn't have much, but they had food, they had shelter, and they had their basic needs met. My grandfather had been a minister, and when he was old and retired, they had almost no income. My father was in college, and he worked part-time while he was going to college, and he sent most of his money to his parents, and he ate mostly potatoes all the time because that was really the only thing he could afford. He had his needs met, barely, but it was pretty hard. But that's frugal, folks. That's truly frugal. Very few of us in this day and age live frugal. We may think we do. Eating mostly potatoes all the time, that's frugal. But my parents, although they were very, very poor, they had their needs met. Now let me give you a definition for need. And this is the definition for need that works. Should work in your life, works in this webinar. A need is something that if I don't purchase it, it will seriously impact my health or welfare. Or if you have a family, if we don't purchase it, it will seriously impact someone's health or welfare. A need is something that if you don't purchase, it will seriously impact their health or welfare. So what are some of the needs? Food, some clothing, some kind of shelter, medicines, maybe transportation, maybe health insurance. I'm not going to tell you what all the potential needs are. But mostly what we buy, if we're honest, isn't needs, it's wants. Mostly we buy ourselves wants rather than needs. And even when we have a need and we're filling a need, we don't have carte blanche. That doesn't mean we can buy whatever you want. Let me give you an obvious example. You need food. Your family needs food. Let's say you have a family of 4. Well, you could potentially take that family of 4 to a really fancy restaurant where you spend $150 a piece and have a $600 bill when you come out of the restaurant. Or you could have a very frugal one-pot meal that you cook for $4 or $5 for the entire meal. They both satisfy a need, but one is appropriate, and if you don't have the money, one is not appropriate. Now, if it passes the 4 frugal questions, then absolutely. You want to spend $600 on a meal for your family of 4? Have at it if it passes the 4 frugal questions. But if it's not, then the only reason you should be spending that money if it's truly a need and you're getting the best value for that need. So that's the second question. Is it the best route? So I gave you that example about the RV. Let me give you another example. Well, one time I was following it was Google Maps, one of the map programs, and I was trying to get somewhere, and my wife and my daughter are like, I don't think this is a road. I think this is a footpath. Well, I eventually got so narrow between two roads, even though I was just driving a little car, I couldn't get through, so I had to turn around and go back. They were right. It wasn't an appropriate path. If you have a home and your toilet breaks, and you have to turn it off so you don't have a toilet you can use at all, then you definitely need a new toilet. As I think I mentioned, we have some rentals, and one of my buddies who does a lot of maintenance for us told me one time, and this is years ago, so it may not be true anymore, but he said, don't buy Glacier Bay brand. He said the Glacier Bay brand toilets that he bought, he was always having problems with them. He said, spend a little extra money and get an American Standard. It was the better value, it was the better decision to buy the American Standard. But let me show you another toilet. This is a Kohler Vale wall hung toilet. And this toilet is $8,800. Now, if you want an $8,800 toilet and it passes the 4 frugal questions, by all means, buy an $8,800 toilet or buy a Ferrari or buy whatever you want if it passes those frugal questions. But now we're dealing with needs, and an $8,800 toilet isn't a need for anybody. So buy that best value toilet, that $140 toilet, and move on. Now for the third question. Something is truly a need and you've decided this is the best route, but you don't have the cash. And so what are you going to do? How are you going to pay for it? Well, hopefully you have a reserve fund that you saved up, and we'll talk about having reserve monies in a later segment. But hopefully you have some reserve funds that you can use. And if you don't, when my wife and I were so poor and we were living on $600 a month in college, we did have some monies in reserve, but we also had a credit card. And if we had a true need that we couldn't afford otherwise, we would use a credit card. And that's the only circumstance under which I think you should be using a credit card. And we'll talk about credit cards at great length in another segment. But hopefully you have an emergency fund. If you don't have an emergency fund, then hopefully you have some other funds you can borrow from. But if you don't have an emergency fund and you don't have other funds you can borrow, and it's truly a need, then guess what? Go ahead and use that credit card. I'm not one of those people that say credit cards are always bad. Now, if you are irresponsible and you can't properly manage a credit card, then maybe you shouldn't have a credit card. But again, that's one of those individual things. But I don't think credit cards are evil. Credit cards are a tool that occasionally need to be used. And I'll be honest with you, my wife and I use credit cards every day, but we pay it off in total every month. And that actually benefits us because we get 3% cash back on lots of things. So, but if you have to use a credit card to finance something, that should be done as a last resort. Like I say, I'll talk about that more later. So let's go back to the 3 need questions. Is it truly a need? Is this the best route? How do I pay for it? So the 4 frugal questions: can I afford it? Is it appropriate? Is this the best route? And is it still worth it to me? I've saved up all my money. Is it still worth it to me? And then the 3 need questions. Is it truly a need? Is this the best route? And if so, how am I going to pay for it? Now, let me give you one more financial principle in this regard. I want to talk about the difference between being frugal and being cheap. Being frugal is how you treat your money. Being cheap is how you treat other people about money. You should be frugal. You should not be cheap. If you go to a sit-down restaurant, you should leave an appropriate tip. That is not frugal to stiff some poor waitress on a tip because you're cheap. If you can't afford to leave an appropriate tip, then don't go out to eat. Frugal is how you treat your money. Cheap is how you treat other people about your money. In our next episode, we're going to talk about a personal financial statement. That's a tool to help you get a handle on where you're really sitting right now financially. All right. Thanks for listening.